You're listening to the JD Rucker Show. Let's begin. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the JD Rucker Show. Stop me if you've heard this one. It was a big day in America, big day across the globe, really. You got news in Greenland, news in Ukraine, news coming out of Russia. But I would say the biggest news of the day is the fact that the Democrats, as of now, appear to have caved. Chuck Schumer decided not to invoke or press forward with the Schumer shutdown. He, at the last minute, just before they were ready to leave the chambers, he came on board and said that he was going to vote in favor of cloture for the continuing resolution, which allows it to go to a vote, and then we've got government funding through September. It's a victory in some ways. In other ways, I think it's a loss. I was really personally hoping that they would shut it down. You know, the ideal scenario for me would have been get it passed in the House, great, move on to the Senate. Republicans remain united, Senate Democrats remain united, and maybe with a couple of John Fettermans of the world voting for the CR, but otherwise they shoot it down, and then we go into government shutdown mode. I think that would have been excellent, a way for President Trump to have even more cards that he could play, a way to demonstrate that with less government in action, that not much goes wrong. That seems to be the case. You always have, of course, legacy media will go out there and say, "Oh my gosh, look at the result of the shutdown. This park is closed, and now, you know, the kids that weren't coming here anyway are still not going to be able to come here if they decide to drop their iPads." Okay, I'm being cynical, but you get the idea. That would have been ideal. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. Looks like there's going to be enough Senate Democrats who are willing to cross over. All they need is 8. They've already got Fetterman, and they've already got Schumer. They're for sure, or at least as of now, there's nothing for sure. We're talking about Washington, D.C., but as of Thursday night, it appears that they've got 2 of the 8 votes that are necessary. Rand Paul, of course, will vote against it, which means that they need 8 Democrats to vote for it. 2 down, 6 more to go, and I would suspect that Chuck Schumer, being the Senate Minority Leader, would not have gone down the road of saying that he's going to vote for it unless he already knew that he had the votes to get it passed. So it looks like we are going to avert a shutdown. Now, here's the silver lining. Like, I'm against the CR. It's a monstrosity. It still is a monstrosity. The only reason that this is the only CR in my life, and probably ever, that I am not vehemently opposed to is because we do have an opportunity with DOGE and with the Trump administration to actually invoke true cuts in government, massive cuts in government, if the cards are played right. We have until September to make that happen. And between now and September, you'll need Rand Paul and Ron Johnson and some of the other senators to be able to rally support for a massive rescission plan. This will cut a whole bunch, if it's done right again. There's a lot of ifs here. If it's done right, it will cut a whole bunch of government. We're talking about to the tune of $500 billion, which to me is just a good start. But I mean, Elon Musk is excited about it. Other conservatives are excited about it. So I guess I'll be, yay, $500 billion. For those who don't know, maybe you're new. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and to give me that thumbs up. But for those who may not know, I would love to cut about, 95% or more of the government. I think we could operate just fine without a whole bunch of the things that are supposedly fall under the realm of the federal government. So much of it should go back to the states, and even the states have bloated governments. A lot of that should go back to the counties and cities, and even there you've got bloated government. Most of it should be falling on the hands of the locals, and perhaps more importantly, the individuals in the family. an inverted government type. In other words, I think that the top of government should be the individual and the family, and then the local, then the city, then the county, then the state, and then the federal government is just that tiny little catch-all safety net, right? It's just whatever falls through the cracks of all the layers above. All right, fine. Government, if it has to be done, it has to be done. Yeah, I'm that guy that wants to privatize roads. So, so don't even, don't even. Let's just leave it at that. We got a great show. Great show ahead today. But before we get into my magical list of amazing topics, let's start off with a short word, very short. I think it's like 24 seconds. 24 seconds of 24 seconds of sponsorship, just to get that out of the way right off the bat. One of the best ways to stay ahead of the deep state and to understand the machinations of the globalist elite cabal is to get information from people in the know, such as former CIA analyst Jim Rickards. Go to jdrucker.com/crisis, jdrucker.com/crisis, and see what information they have for you today. See, I told you that'd be fast. Very fast stuff. Important stuff, by the way. jdrucker.com/crisis. That is important information there. So keep that in mind. Go check it out. Yes, we did have a big day today. Before I get into the big day, because it was actually yesterday that this first story happened, but we're gonna pretend like it's today because I actually had to miss yesterday's show. We had something crazy, strange happen. I had to look it up online to find out what was happening in California, and it's still technically in the process of happening. Those of you who don't live in Southern California, you might be more familiar with it, but we had what was called wind and I think they said storms yesterday. It was crazy. Anyway, I lost internet. So no show. It's like, wow, this is what happens if you live in Oklahoma, not if you live in California. Why would I lose internet connectivity? I thought about doing a show on the phone, but then I thought, you know what? No, we're just gonna skip a day. But we are here. Praise God for that. And yes, the wind is still going. The storms are still going. Apparently, I don't go outside much, so I don't know what that's like. But with that said, this first story comes from Greenland. They had their election, and the center-right leaning party apparently won, and this is good for us, allegedly, and by us, I mean the United States of America, and the potential for Greenland to participate in our nation in some form or fashion, whether that's as the 51st state or the 52nd state, if Canada beats them to it, or whatever, or just being a territory or whatever, something happened, okay? And something will happen, I should say, with Greenland. It's probably just going to be some sort of alliance, but we already have a presence there. Space Force is already there. We need to have a stronger military presence there, not necessarily for attack or defense, but really to be able to keep an eye on two important areas. Obviously, keep an eye on the Europe and Western Asia, including Russia, but also to keep a very close eye on what's happening at the North Pole. And no, it's not Santa. There are other strange things that are occurring in the Arctic Circle, and we need to have as much monitoring and exploration as we can, because we already know that China and Russia are doing it. We need to be far more engaged than we are today, and praise God that President Trump recognizes that and is trying to do something about it. So get ready. Looks like there's a good chance we may be able to welcome our new brothers and sisters of Greenland into the United States of America in some form or fashion. It's probably not going to be a state. Probably not even going to be a territory. It's probably just going to be some sort of alliance. But hey, I'll take it. We need it. We also heard from Russia today. Vladimir Putin was appreciative of the ceasefire. Not ready to sign it, though. He wants to talk to President Trump and see if he can cut a better deal. And I would assume, and I don't know, I've never been too involved with the negotiation styles of Marco Rubio or Mike Waltz or even President Trump, but I would assume that there is at least a little bit of wiggle room, perhaps, for there to be a ceasefire in play. In other words, the initial offering that Putin has effectively rejected is hopefully just the initial offering, and hopefully he and they and Ukraine, they being our representatives and the Ukrainian government, have left a little wiggle room for Putin to be able to get a little victory, enough of a victory to where he'll be able to say, okay, cool, yeah, we'll take that. We were able to cut a better deal and get this ceasefire going, and then let's get to the negotiations table. Let's talk through bringing an end to this war, which needs to end, should never have started, would never have started had the 2020 election not been stolen. But that's a discussion for another day. We're moving forward. We're talking about the present and the future, and that future is looking brighter and brighter every day under President Trump. So let's get into what stories we actually are going to be talking about today. Let's see. Here we go. Catholic laity urges Vance, JD Vance, to launch a racketeering investigation into U.S. bishops. We'll also be talking about Generation Z and their love for cryptocurrencies. President Trump, this is a story that I actually did over the weekend, but we're going to be, or not, it wasn't over the weekend. I guess was it Monday? Gosh, my days go crazy. I think it was actually Tuesday. I might have done this story, but could have been Wednesday. Who knows? It's Thursday, unless you're on the East Coast, in which case it's Friday, right? Yeah, Friday. Yeah, thank God. But that's this story. President Trump to reinstate the travel ban. I already pre-recorded it. No big deal. It's good. It's worth. If you already saw it, it's short. Watch it again. Seb Gorka went on and obliterated Jake Tapper. And now look, I've got mixed feelings towards Seb Gorka. I don't know him personally, so I can't say that I have mixed feelings. Let's say I've heard good and bad from people that I know and trust. Some love him, some don't like him. But today I like him a lot because of what he did to Jake Tapper and really, really driving home our perspectives on legacy media, the fake news. Tariffs, absolutely necessary. This is another one that I did. I recorded this yesterday, and it's very important topic. I think I spent like 20 minutes on that one. So we are going to be playing that during the show today. Gold almost came close to hitting $3,000 an ounce on Thursday. We'll see if it does break 3,000 for the first time ever on Friday, or if it sinks back down. I would suspect it's going to sink back down, but that's just me. Then again, I was wrong earlier today about gold. I thought, anyway. No, it wasn't. I was right. That's right. Never mind. Forget. I thought I was wrong, but I was wrong about being wrong. I was actually right the whole time. And then last but not least, this is going to be a tough story to get through. Soros-Backed Wisconsin Supreme Court candidate Susan Crawford defends her light sentencing for pedophile during debate. And when I read this story, I just wanted to we're going to keep it classy. I'm not going to tell you what I wanted to do because I'm not violent. I don't want, but it was just like, oh my gosh, anyway, whatever. It's disgusting. But we'll talk about it. We will talk about it. It is a big show today. That's for sure. Big show. Not necessarily, I don't know if it's going to go very long, probably an hour and a half or so, but it is a big show in that we get to look forward while staying grounded in the present. I'm not a fan of, always look forward, always look all the way. No, take care of now, okay? I mean, there's nothing more conservative, and for better or for worse sometimes, there's nothing more conservative than addressing today's issues today and leaving tomorrow. And there are, obviously, if any of you Bible-believing Christians out there, you know that there is also biblical backing for that concept as well. But today's show, we are going to talk about today, but also tomorrow, also the future, because it is getting brighter and brighter as we speak. With that said, I'm also not so naive to say, oh, yay, we're winning, time to celebrate. I don't celebrate, okay? Like, even after President Trump won his election, I worked probably harder the following week than I've worked in a long time. I didn't sleep. because there was so much to go over, so much to plan for, so much to discuss. And that's how we handle things here. Yeah. No, let's just, you know what? Oh, also, two quick minor programming notes. Apparently people didn't like me breaking in to prelude the stories. I got a few people that chimed in. They went to jdrucker.com/talk, jdrucker.com/talk, which sends messages directly to me. And a few people said, you know what, you don't need to prelude the stories. Just go from story to story to story. That's how I used to do it. Lately, I've been kind of setting up the story before going into the story. Wasn't very effective. I'll admit it. Wasn't very good. So we're going to stop doing that. And I had noted, it's funny, this was actually a discussion that I'd had with a fellow show host. And I said, you know, there's a lot of times there'll be videos that I want to play, but I don't really have any commentary for them, so I don't play them. And she told me, just play them. It's like people will get it. They don't need you to explain everything to them. You got an intelligent audience. And I said, you don't know the half of it. I have the most intelligent audience in the world, especially the ones that push subscribe and like maybe even right now. They are super intelligent. And you're right. I should, even if I don't have commentary on a great video, I should just play it anyway and just let you take what you will from it. For example, later on I'm going to be playing RFK Jr. in his first, I think it's his first, it might not be his first, but in an official HHS produced ad. I guess it's an ad. It was like 3 minutes, but where it's not really an ad because he's not selling anything. He's just explaining what he's doing and how they are going to try to make us healthy again by getting rid of some of those nasty things that are in big foods. So good stuff there. So we are going to be doing that more often, playing some seemingly random clips, but they all have an interest. I came so close to including this, and I might still do it. We'll see. It's a game time decision, but I came very close to adding this. It's a fake commercial, okay? And I think the Daily Show, some leftist outlet put it out there, but it was hilarious. It was basically President Trump, has clips of President Trump talking about Tesla, sitting in a Tesla, which he did very recently, and they turned it into like a Tesla commercial. And I don't know, it was actually kind of hilarious to me. Yeah, I thought it was funny. So we'll see. If you make it through the show and I don't play it, I would recommend looking it up. You can always find, I think we have it posted over at the Liberty Daily. We have it posted there somewhere, as well as on the Liberty Daily's Rumble account. You can follow me on Rumble, by the way, by going to jdrucker.com/Rumble, jdrucker.com/Rumble if you're not following me there already. Same thing with, we're still going to be pushing YouTube. We're still going to be pushing X and Getter and BitChute and everywhere else. So there's that. But as you all know, I've said it before, I'll say it again, kind of got my heart set on making Rumble a thing. So we will see. All right, let's do it. Let's do it live. Let's get to that first story. Catholic laity urged JD Vance to launch racketeering investigation into bishops. My first question just up front is, why are they asking JD Vance just because he's Catholic? He's vice president. He wouldn't be the person to do this, but I guess, hey, if maybe they have a connection, we'll see. This story comes to us from Jules Gomez over at The Stream. Prominent lay Catholics are calling on Vice President J.D. Vance to investigate the U.S. bishops under the provisions of the Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, the RICO Act, a law first used to prosecute the mafia in the 1970s. We request that a RICO investigation be undertaken into how the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops dispersed funds received from USAID, a cohort of Catholic scholars, journalists, and victims of clerical sex abuse wrote in a March 8th letter to Vance, who is also Catholic. Investigating the church will not be easy. It has a long record of lack of transparency and refusal to cooperate with law enforcement. And this is according to the signatories. Catholic laity have little to no means to correct the leaders of our church. It has only been through civil and criminal lawsuits that justice has been achieved. They offered to help. They said that we have access to some whistleblowers about how the USCCB and the NGOs have misappropriated the funds entrusted to them. The signatories noted that the newly formed Doge has already discovered that an obscene amount of funds has been given to the Catholic Church through its various organizations to help settle refugees and immigrants. How many illegal immigrants did they assist? They asked. Did any of the funds end up in the hands of cartels who are involved in criminal behavior such as sex trafficking and the smuggling of fentanyl? What did they do to protect vulnerable children and women? Rachel Mastrogiacomo and Wiselaw Wallywander, both victims of clerical sexual abuse who signed the letter, said they are calling for the RICO probe so that other innocent victims can be protected from predatory priests and prelates. RICO makes it illegal to acquire, operate. You guys know what RICO is all about. So, yeah, it's something that didn't get much attention not during the campaigns, not during the entirety of Joe Biden's presidency, his entire regime, even though he himself is also allegedly a Catholic. It really does, make us think back to some of the theories that I've had in the past and that I still hold, that much of the push, if not all of the push, at least from the upper echelon of the globalist elite cabal, what they're really trying to do is to smuggle in children. They have an appetite, a very sick, seditious, heinous appetite for children. They need as many of them as they can get their hands on. And what better way to get their hands on them, unfortunately, literally, than by bringing in nameless, faceless children that nobody's going to ask about, that nobody's going to investigate, bring them in from other countries, bring them in across the border through cartels, many of whom are already broken by the time they get here. The cartels have already destroyed these children. And then they're brought here, and then they are disappeared. They just go missing. Some say 300,000, others say 500,000. I would estimate that in reality we're talking about over 1 million people. And for the Catholic Church to be participating in this in any way, I'll admit it was a big surprise. I get it that USAID is is controlling, bribing, manipulating people across the globe. But I did not see the Catholic Church as one of the recipients. Now that we know, at least according to this request, and this what's probably going to end up being at least a lawsuit, if not a criminal investigation, now that we know from these lay leaders within the church itself, what if the Catholic Church, and when I say Catholic Church, I'm not referring to Catholics per se, okay? So I don't want to get all the things, oh, you're ripping on Catholics. No, I'm ripping on the Catholic leadership, just as these lay leaders within the church itself are doing the same thing. We're talking about the bishops. We're talking about starting from Pope Francis and whoever's pulling his strings, if anybody, and all the way down amongst the leadership. They're getting rid of the good priests and bishops. They're installing bad ones, many of the times evil ones. And did they participate? Are they part of this globalist elite cabal program? Because it really is very coordinated, this program to bring as many, ghosted children as possible into the United States and probably across the globe. I think the argument is worthy of further investigation. I'm not going to make any accusations at this stage, but I'm glad that somebody is speaking out. This is what it takes. Things will go unnoticed, unpunished, until somebody has the courage to speak out and to try to grab somebody's attention. So in the beginning I said, I don't know why they would go after JD Vance just because he's a Catholic, but he's vice president. Why would they go to him specifically to seek this out? Considering that he is a fighter, a warrior, somebody who's willing to stand up for those who need him the most. Maybe he's the perfect choice. Gen Z is at the forefront of the digital currency revolution, and it really is a revolution. And it's no surprise that, of course, the youngest technological generation that we have currently with money, we're not talking about, Gen Alpha? Is that the next wave? Gen Z is the youngest generation that is still old enough to have their own bank accounts and stuff like that. But a lot of them are bypassing the bank accounts and the credit unions and going straight to cryptocurrency exchanges. And they're not alone, even though they are leading the charge. This article comes to us from Campus Reform. Generation Z loves nothing more than to look at their screens. Add in the thrill of dollar signs, adrenaline-inducing trades, and the idea of getting rich quick, and we're sold. We're being the author of this particular article. Gen Z is embracing cryptocurrency more than any other generation, placing themselves at the forefront of the digital currency revolution. A recent poll shows Gen Z has more crypto investors than any other generation. 42% of Gen Z investors own crypto, compared to 36% of millennials, 24% of Gen X, which is actually higher than I had expected, and 8% of baby boomers investors. The trend among Gen Z is only growing stronger, with 65% of Gen Z investors planning to invest in crypto this year. We'll get back to the rest of the article, but just as a quick note, for those who are in Gen X or baby boomers, the older generations, if you are wanting to break the trend and follow the one point of semi-wisdom from those youngsters, the easiest way to do that is through Block Trust. You can go to jdrcrypto.com, jdrcrypto.com, and get involved with cryptocurrency, utilizing cash, utilizing your current retirement accounts, whichever way you want to go. Back to the article. Why the craze? Digital gold is innovative, exhilarating, and cutting edge. For a generation that often leaves home without cash or cards, relying instead on Apple Pay and digital solutions, it's no surprise they're drawn to assets that are purely digital and naked to the eye. Among the many generational differences between Gen Z and previous generations is how we choose to invest. We, again, according to the author of this particular article. While millennials and Gen X opt for bank or credit unions, Gen Z investors rank crypto exchange apps as their top choice, the poll shows. Now, I am not one to embrace things like cryptocurrency or artificial intelligence or transhumanism or any of that stuff. Elon Musk might do a lot of good things, but he's not going to get a chip in my brain. With that said, I do understand the wisdom that's associated with the potential here. I think that potential is going to crash and burn at some point in the future. The question is that going to be next month, next year, next decade, or maybe it's even the next generation? Perhaps cryptocurrencies really are the future. That's on you. I'm not a financial advisor by any means, but in this one rare instance, I can appreciate why Gen Z might be right about this one. Here's a true story. I was testing out some coffee. This has been almost a year ago. Testing out some coffee for a potential sponsor. And I had made the coffee, and I went about my morning routine, did my work, doing my thing, and then I took my first sip of coffee. And it struck me. I'm like, holy crap. I had forgotten that I had was testing out this new coffee. I just took the first sip, and I was like, wow, this is really good. And then I remembered, oh, my gosh. This is Promised Grounds. This is the stuff that they sent me. So I started drinking some more of it, and I have become a lifetime customer of Promised Grounds. They are a Christian coffee company, which I know you don't see a whole lot of them. They give back to the community. They're Texas, all American, all Texan, just like a lot of the stuff that we do. Check them out. Go to jdrucker.com/coffee, jdrucker.com/coffee, and check out Promised Grounds. It's great.
President Trump appealed to a lot of Americans during his campaign on free speech arguments and not suppressing speech, especially from the government. But your revocation of the green card, to many, is seen as one of the most anti-speech actions a secretary can take with his powers. How do you respond?
Yeah, when you enter this is an important point, and I'm glad you asked this question. When you come to the United States as a visitor, which is what a visa is, which is how this individual entered this country, on a visitor's visa, okay, you are here as a visitor. We can deny you that visa. We can deny you that if you tell us when you apply, Hi, I'm trying to get into the United States on a student visa. I am a big supporter of Hamas, a murderous, barbaric group that kidnaps children, that rapes teenage girls, that takes hostages, that allows them to die in captivity, that returns more bodies than live hostages. If you tell us that you are in favor of a group like this, and if you tell us when you apply for your visa, and by the way, I intend to come to your country as a student, and rile up all kinds of anti-Jewish student, anti-Semitic activities. I intend to shut down your universities. If you told us all these things when you applied for a visa, we would deny your visa. I hope we would. If you actually end up doing that, once you're in this country on such a visa, we will revoke it. And if you end up having a green card, not citizenship, but a green card as a result of that visa while you're here in those activities, we're going to kick you out. It's as simple as that. This is not about free speech. This is about people that don't have a right to be in the United States to begin with. No one has a right to a student visa. No one has a right to a green card, by the way. So when you apply for a student visa, or any visa to enter the United States, we have a right to deny you for virtually any reason. But I think being a supporter of Hamas and coming into our universities and turning them upside down and being complicit in what are clearly crimes of vandalization, complicit in shutting down learning institutions. There are kids at these schools that can't go to class. You pay all this money to these high-priced schools that are supposed to be of great esteem, and you can't even go to class. You're afraid to go to class because these lunatics are running around with covers on their face, screaming terrifying things. If you told us that's what you intended to do when you came to America, we would have never let you in. And if you do it once you get in, we're going to revoke it and kick you out.
President Trump to reinstate ban on immigration from high-risk jihad nations. Now, let's be very, very honest here. After 4 years of Joe Biden and the open borders that he installed as a result of following the orders of the globalist elite cabal, we currently have more terrorists, more people who want to destroy the United States of America here in the United States of America than we did even ahead of 9/11. And we're talking about by degrees of magnitude. There are terrorists among us right now. There are plots that are being formed, maybe being initiated right now. So, those who would like to make the humanitarian case, I get it. There are, especially when you're talking about countries such as Syria, where we're witnessing the beginning stages of a Christian genocide. I want to help those people. I want to pray for those people, and more importantly, I want to get those people away from harm's way any way we can, but that does not mean bringing them here. We have too many problems of our own to solve. Maybe in the future we can be as giving as we have been as a nation in the past, but as of right now, I just can't support that. There are charitable groups, NGOs, and yes, there is still foreign aid, unfortunately, that's going out. We can help to move people away from the areas where they're being persecuted, oppressed, murdered. Let's get them to Saudi Arabia. Let's get them to Jordan. Let's get them to areas where they will be safer, but within their own region. We don't need to import them here into the United States. According to the article by Pamela Geller over at GellerReport.com, President Trump to reinstate his ban on immigrant travelers to the U.S. from high-risk Muslim nations, including Somalia, Iran, Libya, Syria, Sudan, Pakistan, Yemen, and Afghanistan. She says, I hope religious minorities from those regions will be given the chance to escape Muslim persecution and death. The challenge there, and I know sometimes people will say, well, can't we just import the Christians? Unfortunately, we can't. We can't help them. But we cannot continue to bring people here into the United States of America. Until we get a proper vetting process in place, we can't just say, well, this guy, he's got a cross. This guy, he says he's a Christian. Look, they will utilize any loophole that we allow, including, unfortunately, religious loopholes. They will use those. It's part of the Quran to lie if necessary in order to achieve their goals. So, as sad and as unfortunate as it is for those people that are being persecuted, we have to find a localized solution. We have to negotiate, let Marco Rubio go down there and negotiate a way for Christian refugees to go anywhere in the region where they will be safer. Just not here.
I will immediately restore and expand the Trump travel ban on entry from terror-plagued countries, and I will implement strong ideological screening for all immigrants. If you hate America, if you want to abolish Israel, if you sympathize with jihadists, then we don't want you in our country. We don't want you.
Yes, when he made that campaign promise, he was lambasted by legacy media for being bigoted again. And I'm going to get the same thing, and you're probably going to get the same thing if you agree with me, especially considering we are talking about, let's assume that, let's stipulate that we don't want to import terrorists. But there is a growing number of patriotic Americans who are rightly sympathetic with the plight, especially of the Christians and other religious minorities in the Middle East that are being persecuted, hunted down, often raped and murdered because of their faith. But this is not a binary choice. It's not we either let them in or they're dead. There are other options. We have to pursue those. And they don't have to even be government run. Again, President Trump, Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz, whoever, can do a whole lot with negotiating with the nations in the Middle East. They don't want Gazans. Okay, fine. You guys are against having Gazans. We get it. The Palestinian people, Jordan's had them in their country before they push them aside. Egypt has had them before. I get it. We're talking about Christian populations. We're talking about non-Muslim populations. These are people that, for all intents and purposes, these are not jihadis. They're not troublemakers. They've been spending their entire lives living low in Muslim-majority nations. They know how to not impose, so to speak. So it should be pretty easy for Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz, even President Trump himself, to be able to negotiate a deal to where we can get the persecuted religious minorities in countries such as Syria and move them to another Middle Eastern nation. I know I'm going to get flack for that, but I don't see another viable option. We see what's happening in Europe. We see what's going to happen here in the United States if we don't start. And I shouldn't say going to happen. It is in the process of happening. Go to any college campus and tell me that it's not happening. Go to Columbia and tell me it's not happening. It's already happening. So we need to cut it off immediately. And yes, we still have a responsibility, not just as Americans. Okay, that I would say we don't have a responsibility as Americans. We do have a responsibility as Bible-believing Christians to support our brothers and sisters who are being persecuted. And this is why I do want to find a solution. It just cannot be to bring them here. Not yet. Maybe in the future. Maybe when we have appropriate, proper, better vetting systems. Not just ideological vetting. I'm talking about full-blown, being able to determine the chances of somebody being a terrorist, the chance of somebody contributing appropriately to America. But we're not there yet. And until we can solve our own problems, and until we can secure an appropriate degree of vetting, I am all for President Trump's ban. Sebastian Gorka absolutely annihilates fake Jake Tapper's feeble attempt at journalism, and it was a true annihilation. I'm just going to go straight to the video.
So last month, the Washington Post reported that the freeze on U.S. foreign assistance in Africa has, quote, threatened programs intended to counter al-Shabaab bomb makers, contain the spread of al-Qaeda across West Africa, and secure Islamic State prisoners in the Middle East, according to U.S. officials and aid workers, unquote. Are those cuts still in place? Are you concerned about them at all?
Is that the same Washington Post that propagated the Russia collusion hoax for the last 8 years?
Well, regardless of the Russia...
No, not regardless. You're quoting the Washington Post to me, which is as effective as posting for me or quoting to me any other pillar of the fake news industrial complex. I really couldn't care less what the Washington Post or the New York Times says, especially when it's anonymous government officials. If it's true, put your name to it. If it's not, shut up.
Wow. Yeah, that was blistering. And I would have liked to have heard what Jake Tapper tried to follow up with, but it doesn't matter. Sebastian Gorka is absolutely correct in this regard. It's something where you've got these anonymous sources. Now, anonymous sources, I view them, there's two different ways that you can be a proper anonymous source. Okay, it's not just, oh, all anonymous sources are bad. No, there are times when anonymous sources are good. Number one is when you're dealing with speculation or rumor. Okay, so not accusations, just speculation or rumor. An example of this is when I received the anonymous tip from somebody that I know, somebody that I trust within on the Democrat side. This is way back in 2020 when I was told that both Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg were going to drop out ahead of Super Tuesday to try to help Joe Biden win the 2020 Democrat nomination. That turned out to be very true. And we were talking about speculation, though. It's not like, oh my gosh, this is a blah blah blah. It was a rumor, and that's fine. If you want to spark rumors, as long as you're talking about something that is not a direct accusation. This was a direct accusation. In other words, it's demonstrable. They say that there are these programs that were cut through, whether through the USAID cuts or through other foreign aid cuts, programs that were intended to stop the bomb makers for Al-Shabaab or whatever. It's like, okay, fine. In that type of anonymous source situation, you've got to provide some information. For example, like, what are the programs? Here's an example of a program that was fighting terrorism that was cut. You can't have both anonymous source and obscure claim, obscure accusation. It doesn't go both ways. You can either have a source, a named source, that has an obscure accusation, or you have an anonymous source that has a concrete accusation. You can't have obscurity on both sides. That's not journalism. That's not truth-telling. That's oh my gosh, we've got a little nugget of some random person that's going to remain anonymous, so there's no possible consequences, no getting called out if they're bald-faced lying, but we're not going to check to see if they're lying by asking for documentation that of any sort that there is this. And when I say documentation, I'm not talking about like, oh, they've got to bring out like signed affidavits. I'm saying, tell us what the program was. If this is a USAID program, then it's already out in the public. Which program was it? Which one was it? Was it the transgender opera in Colombia that was stopping bomb makers? Was it, one of these programs, we're not going to say which one, but one of these programs was trying to stop radical Islamic terrorist bomb makers. You can't be obscure on both sides of the anonymously sourced story. Jake Tapper should know that. His producers should know that. CNN should know that. But apparently, in the age of Trump, because all of this really started way back in 2016, they weren't this bad before Trump. A lot of people say, oh, legacy media has always been like this. No, they haven't. Okay, there was a time, believe it or not, it's hard to believe now because it's been so long, but there was a time prior to really Obama, we'll say. It wasn't even so much Trump. It was already getting started just in the opposite direction with Obama. They were covering up. They weren't trying to expose Obama. They were trying to cover up things for Obama. Then Trump comes along and they're trying to blame him for everything. That's the evolution of modern day journalism, at least through legacy media. But prior to Obama, that type of story, that type of question from Jake Tapper never would have happened. Because you can't have, they know, journalistically, either you have a named source with obscure allegations or an anonymous source with concrete allegations. You can't have both being stuck in obscurity. It's ludicrous. Anyway, I don't believe it because of the obscurity factor here. There are no bomb makers that are now flourishing as a result of the USAID cuts or any foreign aid cuts at all. That's a lie. Jake Tapper knows it. But he's willing to lie as long as it'll hurt Doge, hurt the government cuts, stop the reduction in the size of government, and hurt President Trump, and most importantly, hurt the United States of America. That's what Jake Tapper is all about nowadays.
Hi, I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I'm the Secretary for the Department of Health and Human Services. In the final months of the election, President Trump repeatedly called for removing toxins from our food supply. He added his voice to the millions of Maha moms who were touting the Make America Healthy Again agenda. The first step is radical transparency, because right now, not even the U.S. government knows what's in our food. In 1958, the government created a designation called Generally Recognized as Safe, or GRAS, so that we can make common ingredients like salt and baking soda exempt from testing. But today, it isn't just salt and baking soda. Food companies and cooperative regulators have enlarged the GRAS exemption so that these companies can decide for themselves whether a substance is generally recognized as safe. No FDA approval is needed. European nations, on the other hand, require that a chemical be proven safe before it becomes a food ingredient. In our country, the GRAS standard means that every chemical is presumed safe until proven dangerous, and that proof might not happen until millions of Americans are sick with chronic disease. This mass experiment on the American population with GRAS has, in short, been a catastrophe. We now have around 10,000 chemicals in our food, while Europe has only 400. For example, titanium dioxide, potentially linked to DNA damage and cancer, is banned in the EU, but it's in our children's food. Potassium bromate, a suspected carcinogen, banned in Europe and Japan. And you guessed it, it's in our children's bread. Food dyes such as red dye 40 and yellow 5 and 6 come with warning labels in Europe. They're linked to behavioral issues in children, but in the U.S., they're generally recognized as safe. I can't really blame the food companies. They're just doing what we've allowed them to get away with in a system that's taken on a life of its own. We all agree now that it's time to change the system, and that's exactly what we're going to do. I am today directing the FDA commissioner to start the process of changing the rules to eliminate the self-affirming GRAS pathway for new ingredients. I'm also directing the FDA and NIH to ramp up post-market assessments of GRAS chemicals currently in our food so that we can rapidly identify the compounds that are making Americans so sick, and so that American consumers and regulators can make informed decisions. This issue isn't going away. Moms aren't going to return to wanting chemicals in our food that are banned in other developed countries. Even industry knows that we have to change. So I promise you, I'm going to work with all parties, the companies, the moms, the scientists, the consumer advocates, to make American food the healthiest in the world the way that it was when I was a child.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
If there's one thing that people who are brand new to prepping often forget, it's the long-term storage meds. I think a lot of times people either forget them or they don't realize that they can acquire medications that can be held for an extended period of time. My good friends over at Jace Medical, well, they've got you covered, whether it's for chronic meds for illnesses that you or your family members have, whether it's antibiotics, just being ready for whatever is going to happen in the world. These are things that you should have available to you if you're going to be preparing for self-reliance in the long haul. Go to jdrucker.com/meds, jdrucker.com/meds. Use promo code RUCKER10, the number 10, RUCKER10 at checkout, and you get a nice discount on top of that. jdrucker.com/meds. Tariffs are absolutely necessary if we're going to defeat globalism, but we do know that they come at a price. They come at a cost. We have to understand that up front, and I think President Trump and his team have done a very good job of communicating that. For those who aren't aware, I used to be a free trade absolutist, and it was in around 2017, 2018, when I started questioning, I started wondering why aren't the crises happening as President Trump in his first term started rolling out tariffs? And I started digging deeper into it and started trying to figure out how could these mostly Austrian economists, how could they be wrong? The answer is that they weren't wrong. Okay, free market really is the best way. What they didn't know at the time when they came up with their theories, their concepts, their ideology, they had no inkling about full-blown modern-day globalism, especially corporate globalism, which we'll be discussing a bit today. It's a topic that, frankly, everybody avoids. I've avoided it multiple times because when we're talking about tariffs, there are certain arguments in favor of tariffs that are very straightforward, easy to understand, 10 seconds to explain. When you start getting into the corporate redistribution of wealth on an international level, and when you start getting into the ins and outs, the nuts and bolts of how this operates and why tariffs can work to oppose this globalism, that's more of a 10 or 15 minute conversation. At the very least, you could do an entire college course on it, and I'm sure somebody has. So when given the option of, okay, somebody, why do you approve tariffs? Well, because, sit down, grab a coffee, let me explain. No, it's easy to just say, because our economy, we will be able to generate a great deal of revenue to the point of, if it's done right, we might be able to go back to the old days when tariffs were the primary source of income for the U.S. government and we didn't even have an income tax. Okay, that's an easy argument to make, as is, from when you're talking about negotiating with the largest consumer nation in the world. We are the largest consumer nation, so as a negotiating tool, tariffs can work wonders when it comes to negotiating with foreign interests, foreign nations. Our foreign affairs, our foreign policy can be shaped very favorably for us with the use of tariffs. Very easy to understand. And there's the argument about localization. Hey, we need to bring jobs back to America. We need to have manufacturing in America. We need to use American products, use American materials, use American resources, keep the flow of money, the cycle of money here in the United States. That all makes sense, and it's very easy to communicate. But once you start getting into the fight against corporate globalism and globalism in general, now all of a sudden it's like, all right, let's get comfortable, sit with me as we discuss how tariffs fight globalism. But then this article was sent to me by via Brandon Smith over at alt-market.us. We have it posted over at americafirstreport.com. I'm not going to read the entire article. It's a long article, but I'm going to read highlights from it. And I encourage you to go to americafirstreport.com and to read the article in its fullness, because it is important and it's very informative. If he can write an article about it, certainly in considering the timeliness of the issue, I should be able to do at least one segment of a show about it. So skipping ahead, and this is in reference to the Austrian economists who were pushing for basically the libertarian form of free market trade, tariff-free trade. They missed something. And it's not their fault. It wasn't around at the time, So Adam Smith might have witnessed the corruption of mercantilism, but he had no inkling of the monstrosity of modern globalism and how it would ultimately pervert the free market ideal. The same goes for Mises. Their support for global trade was contingent on the idea that government interference is always the root problem, the fly in the ointment. And at the time, it was. They did not take into account the blurring of lines between corporations, governments, and NGOs. They did not consider the corporate shadow government of Davos and the manipulation of markets in the name of, quote-unquote, free trade. They couldn't have even fathomed the creation of organizations like the IMF, World Bank, the BIS, etc., etc., etc. At the time, they came up with their economic theories. That's true. You can, and again, I'm saying this because we have to understand that even though I am a huge proponent of looking to the past and honoring and appreciating and abiding by the wisdom of those, for example, our founding fathers. I am an originalist when it comes to the Constitution. I'm not suggesting that, we need to get rid of all the, anytime I say I'm an originalist, so you oppose the amendments. No, that's not what I'm saying. But the original intent of every aspect of the Constitution, including the Bill of Rights, including the future amendments, the original intent should be used to determine our current course. Just because we're in a different time now, because there's technology, the challenge we have today is that we think way too highly of ourselves, at least some of us do, think way too highly of ourselves and our modern day sensibilities as if they're somehow better than the sensibilities of what I believe to be a more honorable set of Americans during the founding of this nation. But I digress. Let's keep going with the article. Jumping way ahead, these corporations also act as wealth siphons, sucking up consumer cash in one country only to deposit it in other countries instead of cycling the wealth, after they're cut, of course, cycling the wealth back into the economy they rely on for sales. In other words, global corporations act as a kind of wealth redistribution machine that takes money and jobs from Americans and spreads them around the world to the detriment of the American public. As the middlemen of this wealth redistribution scheme, companies generate vast profits while people in both sides of the exchange get very little in return. Mexico might seem like it benefits from the NAFTA trade imbalances, but this is a mistake. The Mexican people and their standard of living enjoy minimal benefits. The companies that use them for labor get the advantage, along with some government officials who are on the take. Now, I would argue something that's not mentioned here, as he's basically describing the corporate-driven international redistribution of wealth that greatly impacts the United States and the people of the United States and the businesses and everything that is American. This is to our detriment when they get engaged in this international redistribution of wealth scheme. But here's the hard part for us to understand. Not understand. How should I say this? We look at globalism as evil, and it is. But not all people that are participating in the globalism or advancing it are necessarily evil or even working on evil intentions. For example, if you can take a company, I'll pick a company out here in a second, but you take an American company that is shipping jobs and they're getting all their resources, they're getting a bunch of stuff from outside. They're not sitting there thinking, okay, how are we going to screw over the American people? They're sitting there thinking that based upon the rules of the game as they're being presented to us today, the best thing for our shareholders and for our company is to partake in these practices. In other words, they're not doing it with malice in their hearts. They're doing it with survival of their company, with advancement and profits of their company at heart. Now, I'm not trying to justify that. I myself, as owner of multiple companies through the years, I've never, ever outsourced in any way offshore. I've never imported. Okay, even our beef company. I mean, would it be cheaper to import beef? You betcha. That's why the vast majority of companies do. But we don't. We get our beef from Texas. Crazy, right? Born and raised in the great state of Texas. Is it more expensive? Yes. But we choose not to. But I could understand. I'm not going to, I will fault other companies that do import beef and then slap a product of USA label disingenuously on their products because they're allowed to do that. Discussion for another day. But point I'm trying to make is that you can't say, oh my gosh, because they're engaged in that, they're evil. For example, Ford Motor Company. Okay, yeah. When you think of Ford, most people would think maybe you might think of a Mustang. A lot of people, maybe most people, would think of the Ford F-150. It's an icon. It's an American. It's America on four wheels, basically, right? Unless you're a Chevy fan or a Ram fan, then it might be evil. But for a lot of Americans, the Ford F-150 represents true Americanism, except that only 32% of it is actually built here in the United States. Most of it is produced elsewhere. Why? Because it makes sense financially for the company to have, for example, engines built in Mexico, to import steel and other aluminum and other materials from other nations versus buying them here. 32% of the F-150 is truly made in America. Now, they are assembled in America, so we got that. Ford is trying. But I would argue, I would almost guarantee, if they thought they could get away with having it completely built in Mexico, they probably would. This is where the tariffs come into play. This is the obvious way. Okay, and again, I'm back to Ford. I'm not suggesting that they're doing it out of evil. Okay, they're doing it because that's what makes the most financial sense, because the rules of the game are stacked in favor of globalism, in favor of this international redistribution of wealth scam that has plagued mostly our nation. It's not just, we can say it's plagued the world, but really many in the world, at least the globalists and their cronies, they have benefited from it. We have not. You have not. I have not. Not nearly enough. The detriments far outweigh any of the benefits of this international. Basically, it's the siphoning scheme, a money laundering scheme, a redistribution of wealth scheme. Taking our dollars, we pay for it, and in an ideal world, we buy a truck, and the money was our money that was used to pay for that truck. Is some of it goes to the dealership, some of it goes to the salespeople and the staff, some of it goes to corporate, but a lot of it is then reinvested into Americans building American things with American equipment, American materials, American everything. And then it's a cycle. Then it's like, hey, this works. But it doesn't. Because the rules that are dictated by the central banks, the rules that are dictated by IMF, World Bank, United Nations, various trade agreements, free trade agreements, the people at Davos, the people at Bilderberger groups. I mean, pick your globalist entity, and they all have at least a little bit of a hand in this. Not only are they taken from the cookie jar, but they're also helping to write the rules, and they're not using Joe Biden's auto pen. Let's get back to the next important segment of this particular article. Let's see, here we go. International economic independency is a form of slavery, especially when corporations and NGO middlemen are involved. Only resource redundancy and localism foster true free markets and individual liberty. Tariffs can help to energize local production and trade and make communities more self-reliant. That said, there's going to be a cost. In other words, yes, it is very much easier and less expensive for us to go to Amazon and order some cheap product that was made in China, distributed through Switzerland, and filtered through Canada until it hits our shelves at Walmart or Amazon or whatever. There will be pain to try to duplicate the necessary items. I'm not talking about the frivolous items. I'm talking about necessary items. For example, pharmaceuticals. It will make drug prices go up if and when we do start producing our own pharmaceuticals instead of being reliant on 90% of our pharmaceutical ingredients coming from communist China. But it must be done. It must be done. Because this is unsustainable. At some point, they are going to pull the rug out from under us. And we are going to be in trouble. Just saying. I think this is the last. No, it's got two more. Back to the article. Hoover was blamed for exacerbating the Great Depression in 1930 with his Smoot-Hawley tariffs. In truth, the Great Depression spread because of a series of policy decisions by major banks and rate hikes by the Federal Reserve, which former Fed Chair Ben Bernanke admitted to openly in 2002. At the time, it didn't matter who caused it. Hoover was the president, so he was going to be the scapegoat. The same situation could happen for Trump if he's not careful. And all conservatives, you and me, we will be blamed by extension. It's important to remember that U.S. production has been hollowed out by decades of government interference supporting globalization, along with unchallenged corporate power. Reining in corporations with tariffs is not going to be enough. There must also be incentives to reverse the damage done by decades of government corruption. I can't think of any other way to rebuild America's production base fast enough to counter the price increases that will inevitably come with tariffs. Defeating inflation would require an unprecedented national effort to bring back manufacturing specifically for necessities, such as the aforementioned pharmaceuticals. Tariffs by themselves are not going to make this happen. And let's look at the pharmaceutical example as our example. Pardon me. I said that if we were to start to bring back production of pharmaceuticals to the United States instead of being so dependent, we are dependent on China. If anything were to really go south with China, Americans would die. Not because of nuclear weapons. They wouldn't have to launch anything. They would die because we have become dependent on the drugs that they supply. We don't have a backup plan. And if we were to start to, and we should, start to wean ourselves from them, that will cause an increase in pricing for many pharmaceuticals. It will be incumbent on us to push forward as quickly as possible. Sort of like ripping off a Band-Aid, right? We see the problem. We appreciate the problem. We understand that there's a problem here. Anybody can see that. If 90% of our pharmaceutical ingredients are coming from communist China, you should recognize that that's probably not a good thing. Probably pretty risky, especially considering the geopolitical turmoil that is brewing surrounding China, the United States, and really the entire world. It would make sense for us to be able to, treat our own American citizens with stuff from America. We have to make that happen. There will be a period of pain because of the increased prices of those drugs. But here's the thing. If we go beyond just tariffs, if we were to go full-blown, wholeheartedly embrace the idea of generating our own, of collecting our own resources and our own ingredients and our own supplies and making everything here as much as possible, the pain, I believe, would be short-lived. Let's get back to this article. I think this is the last one. In the meantime, individual citizens and communities are going to have to prepare as globalism breaks down. This means local production of goods, retailers seeking out local suppliers, people trading goods and services through barter networks, etc., etc., etc. State leaders should consider introducing commodity-backed scrip to offset any potential damage to the dollar. Not a bad idea, and it is already in the works in many states. They should also open up more natural resources to improve local industries. There's a lot that we can do. But the best thing that you can do, all this is policy stuff, and that's the other reason, by the way, that I've decided on multiple occasions not to go into detail about this particular subject, simply because what can we do about it as individuals? Well, number one, we can definitely try to reduce the pressure, because there will be pressure. There already is pressure on President Trump as it pertains to the tariffs. We need to, he does listen to the people, and we need to make sure that there are fewer people trying to scream at him or protest him or scream in his ear or scream at his people or burn down Tesla dealerships or whatever stupid things that they do. We need to reduce that, and that's in part by trying to educate as many people as possible. I would encourage you to find this article over at americafirstreport.com and to send it to friends, send it to relatives, send it to anybody who needs to hear this information. Number two, of course, we should definitely, and I should have put this as number one because it is the most important thing, but we do need to pray as Bible-believing Christians. If you are, if you're not, we can talk about that some other time soon. But if you are a Bible-believing Christian, pray that we as a nation can be protected. Daniel prayed for the protection and the redemption of his nation. Why can't we do the same? I think we should, especially considering the multiple threats that surround us. Electing President Trump was a wonderful, wonderful thing, but the work isn't done. We still have to fight harder. And the most important thing that we can do as individuals and as families, and even to some extent, if you have the resources, as communities, is to go ahead and engage in as much of this localization as possible. At the very least, it used to be common for you youngsters out there back in the 80s and 90s. It was pretty common for you to say, hey, shouldn't you be buying American? Now today it's like, oh my gosh, this was made in America. That's fascist. Oh, we should be buying from Canada. I actually heard somebody say that. Vermont maple syrup. No, you should get the Canadian maple syrup. Anyway. There was a time in the not too distant past when buying American was actually the cool thing to do. We need to try to bring that back as best as we can as individuals. I'm not saying try to force people to. If you can prompt people to, that'd be great. But I definitely like to buy American. I have actually almost thrown away my coffee cup. And when I find more coffee cups that are made in America, this is a really good one. It's a really good one. It keeps my coffee hot for a very long time. It keeps it at the perfect temperature. But be conscious of it. If you want to be an absolutist, awesome. More power to you. If you want to be trying like I do, awesome. That's good enough. Maybe not good enough, but that's good too. But no matter what, localize yourself. Make sure that you are not beholden to anybody. Nobody at all. Okay? Self-reliance should be everything. I'm not saying that you have to go become a hermit, but you shouldn't be in deep trouble if there's a run on food at the grocery stores. You shouldn't be like, oh my gosh, my family's going to die soon. If we're going to have to call on FEMA to save us because we don't have any extra backup food. We don't have any, many gallons of potable water stored. We don't have guns, ammunition, Bibles, all the various things, meds, long-term storage meds. These are all important things. And I would encourage you, I'm not going to turn this into a pitch, but you can find some very good companies that can help you with multiple things by going to my sponsor page, jdrucker.com/find. It's not just my sponsors. It's got everything. It's got my socials, my shows, my websites, stuff like that. But it does scroll down to the bottom. You'll see some great sponsors to get you long-term storage food or long-term storage, meds or gold or crypto or whatever. So check that out, jdrucker.com/find. We have to do more than just sit back and hope that President Trump is able to make these tariffs work. We have to hold a lot of people at bay because there's going to be complaints. We saw what happened when it was very blatantly obvious why the cost of eggs were going up. But every legacy media outlet, every leftist, every Democrat, and many rhinos were screaming about, oh my gosh, Trump's eggs. It's Trump's eggs. Look how it's $8. Are you kidding me? What? It's Trump. Okay, we knew it was because of the culling of flocks as a result of the so-called bird flu. But they didn't want to highlight that. They didn't want to highlight the increase in pricing throughout the entirety of the Biden regime. Okay, and not enough people are listening to Carolyn Leavitt as she's trying to make that argument. So it's up to us to remind people, because corporate media is not talking about the recent dip in egg prices, not at all. They're suddenly, oh my gosh, let's move on to another subject. We talked about eggs all last week. Egg prices are going down. Oh well, is Joe Biden back in office or something? That must be the case because egg prices are going down, and they were Trump's egg prices that were going up. If you're not watching the screen, I am definitely, literally, physically rolling my eyes. It's not all bad, folks. I don't want to be doom and gloom here, but we do have to do our part. Can't just sit back and hope that President Trump fixes it all. This is your nation. This is my nation. This is our nation. We have to do what we can to preserve the United States of America. Former CIA analyst Jim Rickards has built a reputation over the decades, really, of being able to read the writing on the wall and make determinations, make predictions. Some of them are going to be right around the corner, others are going to be further down the road, but either way, he's usually right. It's very uncanny how good he is at this stuff, his latest analysis, which you can find for yourself at jdrucker.com/crisis, jdrucker.com/crisis. His latest analysis surrounds President Trump's tariffs. Now, they have been, in my humble opinion, wildly successful so far. They've been able to make certain things happen that I think a lot of people didn't think were possible. And, of course, they have a dramatic potential revenue-generating effect for the United States of America. But with that said, there are certain risks, certain challenges, and it's not just going to come from China or Canada or Mexico or Colombia or wherever. According to Rickards, he thinks that the biggest threat sits right in the heart of New York City. Crazy stuff. And he thinks that there are things that we need to do as American citizens to prepare because things are already in motion. according to Rickards, this next major event, which will happen, according to his prediction, between now and April 11th, 2025, something that we should pay attention to. So go and check out his latest prediction, jdrucker.com/crisis. See if there's something there for you to gain from and to potentially prepare for, because the world is changing. For us, it seems as if it's changing very much for the better. But there are going to be certain challenges, certain risks. And I think being prepared for those challenges, being prepared for those risks, that's the difference between thriving or just making it by.
No, I'm not. Look, we've been ripped off for years, and we're not going to be ripped off anymore. No, I'm not going to bend at all on aluminum or steel or cars. We're not going to bend. We've been ripped off as a country for many, many years. We've been subjected to costs that we shouldn't be subjected to. In the case of Canada, we're spending $200 billion a year to subsidize Canada. I love Canada. I love the people of Canada. I have many friends in Canada. The great one, Wayne Gretzky, the great. Hey, how good is Wayne Gretzky? He's the great one. But we have, I know many people from Canada that are good friends of mine. But, you know, the United States can't subsidize a country for $200 billion a year. We don't need their cars. We don't need their energy. We don't need their lumber. We don't need anything that they give. We do it because we want to be helpful. But it comes a point when you just can't do that. You have to run your own country. And to be honest with you, Canada only works as a state. It doesn't. We don't need anything they have. As a state, it would be one of the great states anyway. This would be the most incredible country visually. If you look at a map, they drew an artificial line right through it between Canada and the U.S. Just a straight artificial line. Somebody did it a long time ago, many, many decades ago, and makes no sense. It's so perfect as a great and cherished state. Keeping "O Canada," the national anthem. I love it. I think it's great. Keep it. But it'll be for the state, one of our greatest states. Maybe our greatest state. But why should we subsidize another country for $200 billion? It costs us $200 billion a year. And again, we don't need their lumber. We don't need their energy. We have more than they do. We don't need anything. We don't need their cars. I'd much rather make the cars here. And there's not a thing that we need. Now, there'll be a little disruption, but it won't be very long. But they need us. We really don't need them. And we have to do this. I'm sorry. We have to do this, yes.
Gold remains the standout asset as global trade war sinks equity markets. I've said it many times over the last month. I've said it on today's show earlier today. We are going to experience short-term pain as a result of the tariffs. I know they're positioning it as a trade war, but it really isn't a trade war. It is just a normalization of economic relationships. That's the way that I like to look at it, and I'm sticking to it. But of course, legacy media is out there claiming that it's a war and that it's going to cause havoc, but they are really, really dumb. I mean, just look at what they did. They were so proud of themselves when they were highlighting that ever since President Trump was inaugurated, that egg prices were up over $2. $2, I tell you. It was insane. Well, now, as of today, and for the last few days, egg prices have been dropping. They are now below where they were when President Trump was inaugurated. They're down, I think, like $3 a dozen, which is insane. And of course, nobody's reporting on it in legacy media anymore. But let's talk about gold. This article comes to us from Niels Christensen over at Kitco News. The gold market continues to drive toward $3,000 an ounce, and it remains the standout asset in a world filled with economic uncertainty and geopolitical turmoil, according to one fund manager. And it's not just one, it's one that gets quoted, but there are a lot of fund managers out there that are like, holy crap. I had one ask me today what my prediction was, a fund manager asking me, a non-economist, asking me if I thought that gold would break the $3,000 barrier today. And I said, nope. And then when it got up to like $29.90. I was like, holy cow, I think I'm going to be wrong. And then it dipped back down a little bit, just a little bit. Anyway, although gold is trading at fresh all-time highs above $2,980 per ounce, Ryan McIntyre, managing partner at Sprott Inc., told Kitco News that he doesn't see it as overvalued as demand for safe haven assets is surging, and that is so true. Here's a quote from him. I would say that equity valuations are the highlight of the overvaluation on many different metrics. When you look at what is happening in the world and you consider the potential reward versus the potential risk, to me, gold still stands out as the place to be. The comment comes as spot gold prices traded at $2,972.10 an ounce for a gain of 1.3% on the day. At the same time, the S&P 500 continues to slide, last trading at 5,572 points, down 0.5% on the day. Gold prices are currently up more than 13% so far this year, while the broad equity market index is down nearly 6 points. It's my friends over at Genesis Gold, and this is, to be clear, this is a news story, but it would be silly for me to not mention that my friends over at Genesis Gold Group predicted all of this. They were saying this before the election. They were saying, Jonathan Rose pulled me aside. He said, all right, this is what's going to happen. And he's over 2 decades of experience. He explained how because of President Trump's almost everything, every aspect of his policy goes in favor of gold, whether it is devaluing the dollar, which he wants to do, whether it's imposing tariffs, which he is in the process of doing, even if he is able to somehow coax Powell into dropping interest rates, that too greatly benefits gold prices. And he said, a lot of people are going to be hesitant about gold, expecting the stock market to be the place to be, and that's absolutely false. And to be clear, Jonathan has money in the stock market, so it's not like he's sitting there thinking, he's got whatever rosy-colored glasses. Is that the phrase? I don't even know. Point being is that he did predict all of this, and you too can benefit from their tremendous ability to guide people through their investments, through retirement, by going to jdrgold.com, jdrgold.com. McIntyre said it's not just a correction in equity markets driving safe haven demand into gold. He explained that economic risks have now risen to sovereign levels as government debt grows unsustainably. And no matter what, look, you could say that whatever you want about tariffs, interest rates, this, that, or the other, our debt is hands down by far the biggest threat to our nation in the long term. And when I'm saying long term, I'm not talking decades. I'm talking years, possibly even months, but more likely years before our national debt, if not properly corrected immediately, we're going to be crushed by it. There is no possible way to not be crushed by it if it's allowed to continue to rise. Even if they slow it down tremendously, that's not enough. I mean, it has to be reversed, period. That's why I am as much as I have challenges sometimes with Elon Musk, I wholeheartedly embrace his current efforts when it comes to Doge. And I do hope that our Republican-led House and Senate are able to do their part in reducing the debt. With that said, let's get back to the article. McIntyre said it's not just a correction in the equity markets, driving safety, yada, yada, yada. Governments can't just swoop in and bail out the banks or the tech companies anymore, and that's where the huge risks come in. And it's so true. I mean, you can't. That's another undeniable fact. We're not in bailout position anymore. This isn't 2008, 2009. It's not like we're sitting here able to screw over the taxpayers and pay for banking executive vacations and golden parachutes. The money's not there. Period. I mean, there is no bailout that could possibly have an impact because all of that it's gone, just evaporated. Exacerbating the economic risk is the growing deglobalization trend as the global economy faces another trade war. McIntyre explained that the world is losing a lot of cohesion as nations look inward, with the United States becoming the poster nation for this trend as President Donald Trump continues to push his America First policies. And this, again, there's nothing that is going to be absolutely good or absolutely bad, okay? God is the only absolutely good thing that exists. There are going to be challenges even with our America First policies, but those challenges, once again, I hate to sound like a broken record, those challenges do point to strength when it comes to physical precious metals like gold and silver. I'm a financial advisor. I'm not telling you, get out of the stock market because it's about to collapse at any moment. I mean, it might. But even as a non-economist, a non-financial advisor, I do have a great deal of confidence based upon the layman economic knowledge that I have. I have a great deal of confidence in physical precious metals, which is why for a very long time I've been a big fan. I didn't used to be. Keep in mind, okay, like during the Trump years, the first administration, I was not a fan of physical precious metals. I'm like, yeah, they're great, but you know what? Just ride the stock market wave. There's so many better ways to grow your portfolio or to protect your retirement. You don't need gold. I was not even looking at gold and silver back really until Joe Biden took office. And once he did, it's like, oh crap. Let's see, how much is gold? Yeah. So things are different. We live in a different world. We have to stay the course that President Trump and Elon Musk and Howard Lutnick and all those guys, we have to stay the course they've set for us. And I believe we will. And Congress needs to hop on board. The activist judiciary needs to get out of the way. And we need to take some lumps on the way. But getting there, once we get there, once we do achieve a more America First stance, once we do achieve economic stability and basically reestablish our nation as self-sufficient to where we're not dependent on communist China or Mexico or Canada or Germany or anyone else. I'm not saying that we need to be isolationist. I'm just saying that we need to be able to take care of ourselves if any relationships go south. Because if you are working from a position of desire rather than a position of necessity, then you can negotiate better deals. President Trump knows this. He's demonstrated it his entire life, and he's demonstrating it now. So buckle up. Things are going to get crazy for a short period of time. I don't know if that's weeks, months, maybe a couple of years, but when it's done, when the work is done, and it's going to be ongoing, I get it. But when the heavy lifting is done, which is what we're in the process of doing today, the path forward becomes much, much rosier. Soros-backed Wisconsin Supreme Court candidate Susan Crawford defends light sentencing for pedophile during debate. And generally speaking, Breitbart does a very good job with headlines. This one, I think they're maybe missed it a bit because we're not talking about a light sentence. We're talking about a ridiculously stupid sentence. 4 years. 4 years. And we're not just talking about a pedophile. This is a child rapist who repeatedly raped a 5-year-old girl. 4 years for repeatedly raping a 5-year-old girl, for destroying the life of another human being. And this radical judge. I'm going to hold it together. We're going to hold it together. I'm not going to start spinning. We're going to make it through this article. It comes to us from Catherine Hamilton over at Breitbart.com. Democrat Alliance Wisconsin Supreme Court candidate Susan Crawford defended at Wednesday night's debate against conservative candidate Brad Schimel her decision to give a reduced sentence to a pedophile who repeatedly sexually assaulted a 5-year-old girl. This is the only debate ahead of the April 1st election, and this is the most important election of the year, by far. And granted, there's not a whole lot of elections in 2025, but this one is a big one because it's not just the Supreme Court of Wisconsin that will be affected. This could very, very well affect the 2026 election, midterm elections, and the congressional seats there. This race follows a blowout Wisconsin Supreme Court election in 2023, where the Soros-backed leftist was able to win the seat and shift the balance of power to the left. Now there's a 4-3 liberal majority there, and this would be an opportunity, thanks to a retirement of liberal Justice Ann Walsh Bradley. This would be an opportunity for the more originalist, conservative, right-leaning, whatever you want to call them, side of the bench to regain control of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. During the debate, candidates were asked about the attack ads that they have aired against each other, swiping at each other's judicial record. The moderator asked Crawford about a 2020 sexual assault case in which she sentenced the perpetrator to less prison time than the prosecutors wanted. Far less than half of the prison time that they wanted. They had asked for 10 years, she gave 4. And they asked if she regretted that decision. She said, "I don't regret the sentence because I followed the law in that case as I always do. I applied the law, which says the judges have to consider every relevant factor in sentencing." Apparently, the brutal raping multiple times of a 5-year-old girl is not a relevant factor to this Soros-Backed judge. She said you have to consider both the aggravating and mitigating factors, and the Supreme Court has said you have to order the minimum amount of prison time you believe is necessary to protect the public. Okay, so life in prison. How's that? That should be the minimum. If we're really trying to protect the public from a man who repeatedly raped a 5-year-old girl, that to me, we'll cut him a break. 50 years. Okay? We'll make sure that by the time he gets out of prison, he can no longer reasonably hurt any more children. She continued, and my goal is to always keep the community safe. Lies. That's a lie. That is a lie. Crawford is lying about that. Because you can't keep the community safe by taking a hideous, evil child rapist and putting them on the streets after 4 years. You know, that's it. No, not gonna. I am gonna start spitting. If you couldn't tell, I do have a trigger. I can handle just about anything. Okay, seriously. I mean, stories. As a journalist, I see some hideous things, some heinous things, some truly depraved things, stories coming across my desk, videos. It's not fun. It's the arguably the worst part of my job is sitting back and realizing every day, multiple times a day, just how horrible this world is. You know, and then to talk about, look, they're talking about the continuing resolution. They're talking about, this lawsuit or that guy getting fired or Tesla or ha. I do immerse myself. For those who aren't, if you're new to the show, maybe you're not familiar with the show. I am editor of thelibertydaily.com, as well as americafirstreport.com, as well as discernreport.com. And as a result, all three are content curation sites. We aggregate, very similar to Drudge Report back in the day when he was at least still pretending to be conservative. We're very similar to that. And I have to read through anywhere from 1,500 to 2,500 headlines per day. Of those up to 2,500 stories or headlines, I have to read a whole bunch of actual full-blown stories, or at least scan some of them, sometimes reading them all the way through, and I have to watch lots of videos. It's a very long day. I'm not complaining. I love my work. I'm blessed to be able to do what I do. With that said, it can weigh on me, especially with stories like this. Because on one hand, we already know there's plenty of evil in the world, and it can affect us. But when I get really, really triggered is when people like this, people in power, who allow it, who promote it. I mean, she's basically saying, hey, look, if you get me as a judge and you go out and you take a young and perfect child and you destroy their lives, then you're going to get a slap on the wrist. I've known people who have gone to jail longer than 4 years for evading taxes. There's no child's life that has been destroyed as a result. I've known people who have gone to jail for longer than 4 years for walking through a building. And yet, this Susan Crawford, she has to be stopped. This isn't a question of whether or not she should be on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. This is a question of whether or not she should be allowed to participate in any decision of authority, whether it's as a judge or a district attorney or an attorney at all. She shouldn't be practicing law. If, based upon her judgment, her decisions, her morality, her clarity, her understanding of the law, if she believes that the destruction of a child's life forever, okay, for the rest of this child's life, she has been affected by this in the most hideously negative possible way, and if that's worth 4 years to Susan Crawford, then Susan Crawford needs to resign. She needs to find something where she can no longer harm her own community, her own neighbors. She harmed people with this sentence. She harmed the families of the victims of any of her sentences that are similar to this. And she doesn't regret it. She declared it yesterday. That she doesn't regret it. She's supposed to keep the community safe. And to her, keeping the community safe is to put a evil monster behind bars for 48 months. I don't know much about her opponent, but I'm rooting for him. I am rooting for Judge Schumer greatly. And I would hope that you, my wonderful and amazing audience, will do anything you can to support him. April 1st is when this election is. And I didn't even mention, again, don't forget that if the Republicans, or they don't go by political party here, but if the conservative side of the bench is unable to retake the majority in the Wisconsin Supreme Court, then there's a near certainty that the redistricting that would happen between now and the 2026 midterms would result in the Republican Party losing at least 2 seats. These are 2 seats that, had we lost them in the last election, then things would be very different in our nation today. Don't dismiss this. Don't say, it's just a Wisconsin Supreme Court. It's just one judge that sentences tax evaders more than she sentences child rapists. It's not just about that, even though that should be enough. It's also about the future of our nation. It really does. Again, on the scale of 1 to 10, this ranks as a 7 as far as importance of an election. And this year, because it's a non-election year, that makes it the most important election of the year. So we need to act accordingly. That's it. Lord willing, I will be back very soon with another episode. But in the meantime, y'all stay strong, stay safe, and God bless. Is the bird flu just the latest example of the powers that be attacking our food supply? I would argue that yes, it almost certainly is. Now, I'm not a doctor, not a scientist. I'm not sitting there in a laboratory looking into bird flu and trying to figure out if it was man-made or if it's, really spreading to whoever, or if it's in this milk or that chicken or those eggs or whatever. I'm not doing any of that. All I'm doing is looking at the writing on the wall. And the writing on the wall for the last few years has said, hey, they're attacking our food supply. It was Klaus Schwab. No. Sorry, it was the other guy, Henry Kissinger. There we go. His predecessor, his mentor. It was Henry Kissinger who said, who controls the food supply can control the people. And it seems as if that's exactly what they are trying to do. I'm a huge fan of, number one, freeze drying your own food, okay? If you have the time and the money, go get you a freeze dryer. You can go to jdrucker.com/harvest, jdrucker.com/harvest to get you a very high quality freeze dryer, the freeze dryer that we use in my companies. Or if you don't want to spend that kind of money, because they're pretty expensive, or you don't have the time or the energy or whatever, you don't want to do it yourself, it's time to stock up on long-term storage food. You can find 4, count them, 4 awesome options, ways that you can start to accumulate, or continue if you already started, to accumulate high-quality long-term storage food, oftentimes food that will last 25 years. Start getting it built up as best you can, because there may come a time in the not-too-distant future when acquiring food will not be as easy as it is today here in the United States of America. We're already seeing inflation. That's already hitting us. What happens if they inflate it all the way? What if they really try to make us eat lab-grown meat, quote-unquote meat, abominations, or whatever, lab-grown something, GMO this, GMO that, or heck, bugs, crickets, cricket burgers. Get in line for your mealworm bread, the mealworm bread lines. Gosh, so many possible ways that they can come after us, attacking food production plants, again, bird flu, whatever. And I don't think, people, well, no, the Trump administration won't do that. I don't think this is the Trump administration, to be clear. If anything, I would say that the most likely candidate, of course, is the globalist elite cabal. Second most likely candidate would be Communist China. There's a reason why they're buying up as much farmland as possible. And for whatever reason, we've allowed that. But hey, I'm focused on the future. Go to jdrucker.com/food, jdrucker.com/food, and stock up on as much long-term storage food as you can.